If you live outside of Miami-Dade County, please come to me and I'll validate your parking if you parked at the garage that I recommended in Meetup. And we're gonna get started now.
Hi guys, welcome to our standard Crypto Mondays. First things first, who went to the party on Friday? That was a super fun party, so shout out to eToro. If you guys are unaware of what eToro is doing, I can definitely talk to you about it more a little bit offline, but on Tuesday, tomorrow, we are doing a trading fundamentals, so teaching people how to trade just emotionally, like and you'll learn about it more tomorrow, but if you have not RSVP'd to that, I would go to meetup.com. And today's format for Crypto Mondays is a little bit more open format. So how many of you guys have been here for the first time today? Cool, we have some first timers. Cool, well, normally what we'll do is a format where someone will give you a presentation and we do a Q&A. Today's is a little bit different. Our speaker is Samuel Arms. He is president of the Florida Blockchain Business Association, and he also is the Blockchain and Legislative Affairs Director for Seminole County, which if you guys don't know, Seminole County is the only and first county in the United States to accept Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash as a form of payment for your taxes.
Yes.
So, a lot of cool stuff happening in Florida, and also with Sam as well. Earlier this year, when there were sessions in Tallahassee, a group of us from Miami, from Orlando, from Tampa, and one more major metropolitan region, and Jacksonville, we all went up to Tallahassee and we did some lobbying. So, Samuel's probably going to talk more about this, but the blockchain working group is a bill that passed and we lobbied for, and it was really interesting going there and talking to the different legislators, because across the board what you saw every single legislator say, yes, we'll vote yes on this. So it passed, the governor signed it into law, and now different people are being appointed to the working group. Here in Miami, I don't know if you guys know, but our Mayor Francis Flores, who did a ribbon cutting ceremony for us when we had the opening. We have a plaque here written from him and signed by Mayor Francis Flores, a declaration from the city. And he was appointed to the blockchain working group. So we have a lot of cool things happening in Florida, specifically in Miami, and you guys are absolutely a part of this. I don't know how you ended up here, I don't know how you heard about it, but you're in the right place. Yes. So this format is going to be a little bit different. Samuel's just going to give us an update on what's happening in Florida, a little bit. I mean, people don't always understand how government works, so he's going to teach us a little bit about that. And then we are going to have a roundtable discussion. So we had more RSVPs than we planned for. We wanted to keep this one a little bit smaller. Normally the room is way more full. But then we started getting all these RSVPs, and so we moved the tables around, but it's still a roundtable discussion, you guys. So I want you to feel welcome after his presentation to ask questions and to give feedback. What we had posted beforehand was some questions so that way you guys would be prepared with responses to those questions. And ideally what we want to do is we want to make sure that our voice is heard with the legislators in Tallahassee. So this is the chance to do that, and thanks for coming to Crypto Mondays. And without further ado, Samuel Arms of the FBBA.
Thank you, Erica. I normally...
Sorry, one more thing. I'm sorry. Swag, always we love to give away free swag. So thanks to Block Tech and Mining Disrupt, we have all these cool bags with like different little pockets. On the way out, please grab one. They're, I'm sure everyone gets free stuff all the time, but these are actually cool because they have little pockets. So please take some on the way out, okay?
All right, now it's me. So I normally don't use a mic, so hopefully I don't scream your guys' ear off. So civics and government isn't exactly the most exciting topic. I've given this presentation multiples of times, and a lot of times people fall asleep. If I see you fall asleep, I'm going to use the laser pointer that I now have and point you out, so don't fall asleep. And I cut down on the presentation, so hopefully you won't have time to. So yeah, quick background, I've been in the blockchain crypto space since about 2013, bought my first Bitcoin, woohoo, super cool stuff, but then somehow I ended up working for the military and the government. They wanted to know whether drug cartels or ISIS were using Bitcoin to money launder. Fun fact, they're not. I think we all know that. After that, I had a short gig in the State Department. They kind of wanted to know the same thing, did research for them. Came back to Florida, worked in the Florida legislature, got to know the political process, realized no one up there understands technology in general, especially not blockchain. So then, after a couple months of thinking, I created the Florida Blockchain Business Association. said, sure, I'll do it. I'll be the one to educate politicians who don't even use email. So that's most of what I do. And then, of course, as Erica briefly touched, we helped pass a bill and had a blockchain day at the Capitol, which was the first one here in Florida. So today I just want to quickly go over the Florida political process, the Florida political makeup. Some of this is going to be common knowledge that hopefully you already know, but you will often be surprised what you don't know. So to begin with, what are our main objectives? Who are the main players in Florida's political process? How does Florida's political process work? How do you pass a bill? And then what's Florida's current view of cryptocurrency and blockchain as a business environment? What does the government think that we're up to? So these are just some really quick facts. Florida is a part-time legislature. Session is 60 days out of the year. That's it. You have committee weeks, which are actually going on right now. Today was the first day of committee weeks. Those are just days leading up into the session, so they only have 60 days to pass our budget constitutionally. That is their only job. Every piece of legislation that they pass, they don't have to pass. Their only job as a legislature is to pass a budget. But as you know, hundreds of bills get filed because they like doing all kinds of fun stuff, quote unquote. So they like to go beyond their responsibilities. Session this year for the 2020 is January 14th to the 13th. You do have a thing called extended session or special session. It's politics as usual, so I don't know if you see, even on the congressional level, sometimes people are called back into Congress to touch on an issue. We had this, I believe, last year, 2 years ago, when we had the Parkland shooting, there was a special session that was called to address gun legislation. So special session is when session's already ended and they bring everybody back. Extended session is they decide they can't come to an agreement by March 13th, so they just keep going. Florida representatives and senators only earn about $30,000 a year, and that's to go with the whole part-time legislature. They're not supposed to be career politicians. It encourages them to do something on the side. They are term limited, 8 years at a time, but of course all they have to do is do 8 years, not do anything for 2 years, and then they can hop back in for another 8 years. So that's kind of been what's happening. And then as of 2018, in the midterm elections, we actually got a whole wave of new legislators. So people who have never passed a bill, who kind of had to figure out the process in the game. So that was kind of an exciting little phase. So this is the current makeup of the Florida House. So you have 120 members, 73 Republicans, 47 Democrats. Each representative can only pass 6 bills, or can only sponsor 6 bills, right? So when you're thinking of the political process, how people get elected, right? You have 2 things that each one of these representatives is going to be thinking about. One, leadership. So if you only get 6 bill slots, right, leadership is going to sometimes tell you what bill you're going to pass, right? Which literally is a top-down approach. And then so you might figure out, okay, leadership, you know, Speaker of the House says they're taking up 4 of my bills, so then I have 2 more. So then the next question is, what are those 2 bills going to be? Often that's whoever donated to your campaign. So whoever donated to your campaign comes up and says, hey, I see you have a bill slot open. I don't like this sort of regulation, or I want to create regulation. Let's sponsor a bill. So that's kind of how that process will work. And of course, that has to go through 3 committees, which we'll go over very shortly. And like I said, it's more of a top-down structure. So you do whatever the top guys say. You don't really have much of a choice. So that's the current Speaker of the House, Jose Oliva. He's actually here in Miami, in the Miami Lakes, Hialeah area. And the future Speaker of the House, who's actually being inducted in a formal ceremony, I believe tomorrow, is Chris Sprouse. He's from the Tampa Bay area. This is the Florida Senate. So as always, it's smaller. It's only 40 members. They can sponsor as many bills as they want because there's so few of them. So that means every representative's mission is to find a senator to sponsor your bill, right? Obviously, you want to go to representative first because they have limited bill slots. Senators just don't care. Their bills also go through 3 committees, and this is more like a free-for-all. So the Senate leadership doesn't have as much control. Senators often just tell leadership to go screw themselves, which is pretty common practice, even on issues you would think are more uniform. They just like to cause trouble. And that's Senate President Bill Galvano. He's Tampa Bay, and so is the next upcoming Senate President, Will Simpson. He's also in the Tampa Bay area, which is kind of good and bad. If you're in the Tampa Bay area, that hopefully means that any bills that are a priority for that area, maybe that's an appropriation, some big highway project, they normally prioritize that. So there's always a benefit in having strong leadership up top in your local area. And then, of course, we have a Republican governor, Ron DeSantis, and Lieutenant Governor Jeanette Nunes, the Florida governor and cabinet. We have the CFO, who in the crypto realm is kind of whom we're most concerned with. That's Jimmy Petronis. We have Ashley Moody, and then the Commissioner of Agriculture, Nikki Fried. All of them, so we actually have the youngest governor in the union, and we have one of the youngest cabinets as well, which is pretty kick-ass. We've had meetings with almost all of them about some of the crypto, blockchain stuff that we're doing. None of them really understand it fully, but they all think it's very cool and positive, which is a very good sign. So, starting with where Florida's at in kind of the legislative process. So back in 2018, during the midterms, this is during the CFO's race, Jamie Petronis, who is the current CFO, came out with some tweets that were pretty negative toward the cryptocurrency blockchain industry. He posted a report that was by like NBC or CNBC, and it had 12 points about blockchain, and like all of them had to do with money laundering, right? So he was focused on consumer protection, saying we need to regulate this stuff. Frankly, he was in a race with a Democratic opponent, and no one was talking about their race, so a lot of people think he just did this to kind of add some excitement, because no one cares about the CFO's race. But at the time, he was calling to set up a crypto czar. At Crypto Czar's history was pretty short. They appointed a man to find a crypto czar, and then they fired the guy to find the crypto czar. So that's kind of how things are in Florida a lot of times, is we set up some agency or make some decision, and then 3 months, is that me? 3 months down the line, they decided to cancel it. So that was in 2018. So then, come present day, what we did last legislative session for 2019 is we lobbied and passed a bill, which is the Blockchain Task Force bill. So to give you an idea, once again, of how you kind of introduce legislation, you need a senator and you need a representative. So we got Representative Santiago to sponsor House Bill 735, and then we got Senator Gruters to sponsor Senate Bill 1024. So at the beginning, both of these bills say the exact same thing. So this is kind of more the boring civics part, but it's extremely important to know, because this is the drama that I have to go through, and if I have to go through it, I'm going to make you go through it. So, and by the way, look how impressive this is. All of these are yays. There's no nays, and that is like never heard of, so that's freaking awesome. But we were assigned 3 committees, right? So on the banking side, banking, insurance, innovation, industry, technology, and the rules. House side, pretty much the same kind of ideas and committees. Each of those committees are made up of a specific number of people that we then have to go lobby each of them individually and tell them why they should pass our bill. So this process is made to actually kill bills, right? They can assign you even up to 4 committees. And a lot of times the committee process is very lengthy. You have to try to get on the committee calendar to even hear your bill heard. So a lot of times bills die because they just haven't been through every committee, or they decide not to hear your bill. So we worked our asses off to make sure that each committee was going to hear our bill and vote on our bill, which is pretty awesome. So it ended up going through all 3 of those committees, and it ended up passing in the Senate. And then if you see this, passed for laid on the table. So we ran some political problems, right? So our House bill ended up being different from our Senate bill, which you try not to let that happen, because what that means is if they're different and they go to get voted on the House floor and the Senate floor, right? If they're not the same bill, then you can't really pass it. The bills have to match. And what had happened was, in the 3rd Senate committee, someone had input a provision, an edit on the task force, which means we had to do all kinds of running around to make sure that eventually the House bill would look the same. So what does that mean? It means we technically sacrificed the House bill, and we had the House bill take up the Senate bill. So that's all just kind of political maneuvering that you don't necessarily need to know about, but that is how the bill got passed. And those are kind of the tricks that you have to do to get a bill passed. We also, what we did was, we snuck the entire blockchain task force bill in another bill. And so don't ask me how you have the ability to do that. But you can. When you have what happens are trained. So you guys know in Congress, right, there's one bill that's thousands of pages long, right? Everyone's familiar with that. The reason that happens is because one bill will gain traction and others won't. And so if you want your bill to pass, you say, oh shoot, that bill's gaining traction, so why don't we just attach ours to that one, right? And so then you get these long trains of bills. So that's what we did as kind of a safety backup. We attached our bill to another bill, which also passed. So that was double good news. So what is this task force? Who's making it up, and kind of what's the point, right? So the task force is going to consist of 13 members, 5 of which have been appointed so far. 3 agency heads or executive directors of cabinet agencies by the governor, 4 members of the private sector with knowledge and experience in blockchain technology by the governor, 3 members by the CFO, 1 member by the president of the Senate, 1 member by the Speaker of the House of Representatives, and 1 certified public accountant appointed by the governor. So which one of these kinds of stands out out of all? That's pretty specific, isn't it?
Yeah.
So when I'm talking about earlier about what happened here, getting the bills to match, so that's kind of what happened, right? So the public accountant lobby is very strong, I learned. And they were able to do that. They were able to just get one of their personal people on there, which is good for them. But obviously we had to do some political maneuvering down the line to make sure the bill had actually passed. But you know, a lot of the work goes down to like kind of minutia of the bill. So for example, if you notice, let's say private sector, because originally what it looked like was going to happen is this was just going to be an entirely public government task force. And I don't know if you guys trust the government to know what you're thinking and feeling, but having a task force made up entirely of government officials is not what we wanted. So we made sure to put language in there to make sure they had to get people from the private sector. You know, knowledge and experience in blockchain technology, I guess that's extremely relative. It means whatever the appointee wants it to mean, but at least it's there. So then this is kind of, we outlined what the task force is supposed to do, right? So identify the economic growth and development opportunities presented by blockchain technology, assess the existing blockchain industry in the state, identify innovative and successful blockchain applications, review workforce needs in academic programs, make recommendations to the governor and legislature that will promote innovation and economic growth by reducing barriers to expedite the expansion of the state's blockchain industry. So overall, one of the reasons the task force bill is so good is it's a good putting the legislators' feet in the water, right? The reason we were able to pass it so easily, quote unquote easy, is we weren't asking for anything specific, right? We're putting all the work in this task force, which is hopefully going to do the due diligence and research for the legislature to say, hey, look at what Wyoming's doing. We know for a fact that it's working, so we should be doing something similar. As opposed to just straight out saying, hey, let's sponsor some kind of token taxonomy act here, because they have no idea what that is, where to even start with that. So this is a good beginner, it's a good entry point. Also, so further, I mean, a general description of the costs and benefits of state and local government agencies using blockchain technology. I mean, so it's pretty all-encompassing. One of the funny things about the bill is it states in there, and I learned this recently. See, I'm always learning part of my job because government is just some strange creature and animal. It said the first meeting and all the appointees had to be appointed within 90 days of the bill passing. Well, 90 days would have been about a month ago. So I learned that if there's no penalty for not following some kind of day or restriction rule within a bill, then government just doesn't care because no one's going to get in trouble, right? So 90 days didn't mean anything. So that's why to this day, we only have 5 people appointed and we still need 8 more. Those 8 more are all made by the governor. So that's it.
Well, one thing, hold on, just to put in some other words, one thing that's really interesting about blockchain task forces, specifically what's happening in Florida, is that essentially when states are smart enough to understand that, hey, this technology is taking over and we're going to need to appoint people in order to make sure that our state is being friendly towards it or unfriendly towards it, this is the first thing they pass, right? So they pass a working group of people whose minds are put together that are going to be able to direct the government when it comes to what should or should not be passed. Now, Florida, I think, in the entire nation is the 4th, right?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, we're like we're 4th. We're the 4th out of maybe, I don't know, 5 or 6 states that are smart enough to know that this is what's taking over. So Florida is still very ahead of the game, and you guys, I mean, you guys are part of it. Go ahead. No, we're the 4th to form something. It's either 3rd or 4th to form a group within government that says that this is our go-to group of people. Now also the task force, I don't know, sorry Sam, I didn't listen to everything you said, but the task force is only supposed to be around, sorry.
So the
Yeah.
task force is supposed to be around 90 days. So they have 90 days to submit a report, and upon submission and approval of that report to the governor's office and the legislature, it's supposed to be disbanded. But now I'm like, I don't know if that really matters. What's that? Yeah. Yeah, and so, I mean, what happened in Wyoming is even their task force is disbanding, and government is creating, within the legislature, a blockchain task force. So we could see maybe something similar happening here in Florida, which would be awesome, or maybe just seeing blockchain encompass the already tech committee within the legislature. But yeah, what's also good is from a strategic perspective, obviously next session's coming up, so we can use this task force, I don't want to say as a Trojan horse, but as an opportunity, since it's already in government, to use that authority to also start pushing other bills. So I was hoping that this task force was going to be formed in time for these committee weeks, but it's not. So using the task force to our advantage in the 2020 session probably isn't very likely, which is why I'm using my organization now to do what I call parallel approach, where we're still going to be pushing innovative initiatives and hopefully innovative bills this session, and the task force will probably be making its recommendations for the 2021 session, so that we can still keep our feet moving. But yeah, I mean, I'll take any questions that you guys have. Yeah, go ahead.
So the remaining 8 were all governor appointees?
Yes.
Did you say anything about why you guys run it?
No.
Can you repeat your question? It's a really good question.
I was going to say the 8 remaining spaces on the task force are all to be appointed by the governor, and if he hasn't done so yet, has he given a reason?
No, and he doesn't have to, in a sense. I mean, if you think about the top 10 political issues of our day, blockchain is not one of them, especially if you're governor. So, frankly, it's probably just not one of their priorities, even though it would be easy, you would think at least, to kind of appoint all those people. It's just not a priority. Hopefully it will be in the next few days. You know, who else?
How do those people get appointed or like get to his decision process? Like, how does that work?
Ooh, that's a great question. I mean, so that all depends, right? I mean, so you hope it's merit, but realistically it's merit and it's also who you know, right? So if I'm a big donor and I donated, I know this is going to be too high, but like $50 million to some super PAC, right? And then, oh shit, you formed a committee. I know a guy who I want to be on that, and I give you $50 million. You know, what are you going to say no? Yeah, you know, I mean, and then so that's how that works, which can be good, can be bad. Sometimes those institutional people have institutional knowledge that I will lack. I don't necessarily know about more formal state infrastructure like maybe some big 65-year-old donor might, right? What concerns me is maybe they know absolutely nothing about blockchain.
Are there any other actions other than giving $50 million that can be done to help encourage this process? Like, are there any petitions, any type of like canvassing, anything that can be done?
So that's why we had our first blockchain day at the Capitol, where I took me and some community leaders up. We met with a combined over 70 different legislatures. So what I did is the FPBA has community leaders. Scott is one, Lenny is one from the Palm Beach area. They're kick-ass people who come up with us. We'll send out emails during session to their local and state legislators, and we come up with a script for them and say, hey, promote this blockchain bill, but then also talk about your community. So that makes it more real. I always tell people, if you can walk up to a politician and tell them, hey, by the way, this magic internet money stuff, I feed my kids off of that, right? It makes it more relatable. That doesn't mean it always works. It doesn't mean a politician is all of a sudden like, oh my God, I'm gonna pass your bill now, you know. But it makes it more real for them, seeing someone face to face. as opposed to just, posting angrily on Twitter or whatever form of activism you might try to do. So we definitely will be doing that again in 2020. We'll be having another blockchain day at the Capitol to hopefully either promote the task force or promote whatever legislation that I'm currently working on promoting now. So yeah, I mean, and they even have legislative delegations which I don't know if a lot of people in here know about that, but like Miami-Dade County will have a legislative delegation where every representative and senator who touches the Miami-Dade County comes and listens to you speak. You get 2 to 3 minutes to say whatever you want. So a lot of times that information isn't the easiest to find, but it's out there. So, I've been to some of those speaking on behalf of groups. I try to get some of my people at those, just so that it's brand awareness, right? The more they hear blockchain, the more they think, oh wow, more and more people care about this, maybe I need to focus on this.
Yeah.
It's a lot of grassroots.
Yeah, also too, I think you had a question. Okay, anyway, so also too, I would say that if you're interested in really getting involved, the Florida Blockchain Business Association is a great organization that has open ears to listen to what people want. Right now, tonight's a night where he comes out, but we live in an online world, so feel free to reach out to him and say, this is what I'm interested in getting implemented. And then also too, if this question was specifically how can you get on the task force, applications are closed because they were already supposed to appoint people. So.
Okay. I'm going to ask my question. I actually have 3 questions, but I'm going to put them on the table and you can answer whichever one you want. So the first one is, what is California's position on this whole thing? Because I think, California would have a big tool in
State or federal?
the state of California. The second one is, how does these various state laws interrelate with federal law if there's any kind of issue there? And then the final one is, if you were just to look at Florida, what would be the different stakeholders and who would be, what sides would be taken? I'm trying to understand who would have opposing views on whatever would be passed.
So California's done 2 things. They're setting up a task force that I don't even think begins until 2021. So I don't know why they did that. But I have to double check that. But it's not going to be done before ours. They're doing some stuff with stable coins and marijuana, which I think is pretty awesome, and I'd love to do something like that here. So my other job, I do pilot programs, and I'm working on pilot programs for the state using Seminole County. So that's my blockchain and legislative affairs director side. So we may even pilot something like that in the future and beat California to it, because that's what I like doing anyway. I can beat California, I will. From a state and federal perspective, one of the let me think, how long do I want to talk about this? Caitlin Long's Taxonomy Act is a good example of that. So we currently have no regulation of a digital asset, right? Which is interesting. So normally assets, from a regulation point of view, are controlled by state and state authority. But we currently have, in the Token Taxonomy Act, the federal government saying, well, we're kind of viewing everything as a security kind of internet type, so we're going to regulate digital assets. But if it is a digital asset, then it should be state regulated, right? Which is kind of this whole Wyoming federal dichotomy. So that's a good example of, I guess, federalism. There's nothing new under the sun. So you're going to see kind of a struggle there. And some people think maybe the feds are using this new token economy to kind of backdoor some of these states, because now they can say, oh, well, we already have control of digital assets. Why don't you give us control of real world assets, right? And then, of course, there's frankly things that I could legislate, so I could say, like Caitlin Long does in Wyoming, if you're a utility token, then you're not a security within the state of Florida, but that ultimately belongs to the SEC, right? So it's kind of a touchy issue. But they're watching. I mean, the SEC is watching the states. So that's why, I kind of want to put Florida on that bandwagon, because we're able to have influence. Even if we're kind of overstepping our bounds, that means they're watching, and we can even influence what the feds are doing. Can I answer all 3 of your questions?
Wait, 2 things on the first 2 questions. So in terms of California, you have Representative Brad Sherman, who is already, I think he's in the legislature of California, calling Bitcoin a scam, saying that it's
Oh, that's federal level. That's federal level.
Sherman?
Yeah, he's a congressman.
For California.
Yes.
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 And so you
And he's
have,
crazy.
And he's crazy. And you have some people that are really, really coming against it in specifically California. Also, too, on a federal level, if you guys do or don't know, Wyoming is the leading state when it comes to bringing like tax-friendly and like just like friendly blockchain laws, right? So if you guys don't know who Caitlin Long is, I would look into her a little bit because she's really interesting. But basically, they've done it to the point to where companies are incorporating in Wyoming because Wyoming has so many benefits. So for us in Florida, we want our state to look like this, which is also part of the next part of the talk, which is going to be let's give some suggestions. But they're doing things to where, like, for example, who was here for the IOHK conference? Who did I give free tickets to? All right, let's go. Yeah, raise your hands. Anyways, so you had the Wyoming guys come out, and they were talking about how, specifically, he told me off the books that Fidelity manages $2 trillion worth of assets, and they were in talks to relocate Fidelity into Wyoming, specifically because it's good business laws. Now, Wyoming's a little bit different because Wyoming is Wyoming. You know, there's not a lot of people there. However, the people that are there are able to push legislation through. So I mean, they have certain things into law that says like open source developers. And so if you're an open source developer and you post code, you are not held liable for how someone else uses that code, which makes developers want to live and want to move into that state. For us specifically at the Blockchain Center, we've incorporated in Wyoming because you're actually able to tokenize your company down the line. And also too, bank accounts. Anyone who does Bitcoin dealings, you know how hard and how many bank accounts you probably have personally gotten shut down once they find out that you're dealing with this because obviously this threatens traditional banking system. Now in Wyoming, they have specific laws that they're putting into place to where you can have banks that are based in Wyoming and you won't get in trouble for doing Bitcoin stuff. So you're seeing Coinbase, you're seeing Gemini, you're seeing these big players set up shop in Wyoming. So for us in Florida, what we want is we want them to come to Florida, right? So this is all part of the process. Go ahead.
Retail banks, or I was reading today on SDK's Telegram, that there are a number of banks, international banks, that are not accepting exchange, like cash outs from Kraken and Coinbase.
So her question was which retail banks are not allowing them. I'm going to say 90+%, especially if they're in the United States. So
Which
you're,
ones are? 'Cause I
There's
cashed out.
I have credit, like Mid-Florida Credit Union, but that's not down here.
I
But
cashed out to Bank of America, and maybe they just didn't know, but I didn't. have any
probably it's
problem,
because it's small scale, right? But if they see you do large scale, then you get triggered and you get kicked out. But
I
if it's
know,
small
I have
scale,
Bank of
but how
America.
much? It wasn't like 6 figures, so.
Well, because I have Bank of America, and they won't let me. They won't
What?
let me buy
Oh, God.
on Coinbase, which is funny because
What?
that's your own money. And the other funny thing is that you learn about this industry, especially from a legal point of view, is we're dealing with this new technology, but the issues we're actually attacking are really old,
yeah.
right? The idea of like being able to own something, the way our current financial system's set up, you have an IOU of an IOU, right? Whether that's fractional reserve banking or even if you own stock, right? I mean, if you own stock through a third-party entity, they can do whatever they want with that stock. Caitlin's Long's demonstration was, it's like you give your car to the valet then takes your car and rents it out, does Uber, maybe even gives it away, sells it, and then by the time you get it back, it's the same make and model, but maybe it's not the exact same car that you had previously owned. That's kind of how our current financial system works.
All publicly traded stock is third-party entity.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah.
So
Every stock.
it's the whole idea of ownership in a lot of ways. That's why they also set up a bank that doesn't do fractional reserve banking in Wyoming. That's going to be State Chartered Bank. Of course, that wasn't just for crypto. There were some larger interests that lobbied for that. But I think that's just an important concept to keep in mind, that we're not dealing with anything new from a legal perspective.
So we have a question from Jean.
Yeah.
So could you name more examples of potential legislation that are like being discussed that should the task force gain more traction would be, a potential initiative?
So, and this is funny because this just came out today. So one of the things that we were looking at was a fintech regulatory sandbox, which I think is awesome. And then the governor just came out and said that they're in support of a fintech regulatory sandbox, which is awesome. So that's super good news for Florida. Pretty much, I mean, a lot of what's going on in Wyoming, especially like I said, with digital assets, maybe defining what a digital asset a security and a currency are on the state level, so that we know if you are in the digital asset realm, you're only bound by state authority. Some of the more boring topics would be like a money transmitter license, right, and maybe going under reform for that. You have to be careful, and it's better to be slow legislatively than pass bad legislation. So a lot of what we're doing is just kind of watching and seeing how things turn out in other states. One of the current problems is everyone's defining blockchain in a different way, which is really bad, and some of them are going to lock themselves in down the line. So that's a good question. How do you define blockchain? And if we're going to put blockchain in any future bill, something as simple as that, we need to make sure we get right. But I think those are the two biggest things: is anything having to do with the definition of digital assets, and then of course a fintech regulatory sandbox. What the task force I think is also going to do is look at actual infrastructure. So you may see a bill that says we're going to appropriate funds to update our database system on some kind of blockchain, whether that's a smart move or not. So it's not just stuff that they have to do. You don't always need a bill to pass to be a promoter of the industry, right? So the agencies have a lot of authority and power. So hopefully there will just be recommendations to agencies to carry out and maybe funding for them to do so.
And one thing I would say we can do here in Miami is, guys, like, tell Francis Suarez, like, we're so glad you're on the task force bill, because we want him to also place this as a priority. And I know he's been trying to get on, and I'm glad that he did, because he represents our area and he's totally in tune with what we're doing here. But just like some tangible things you can do is, if you see him, just talk to him about blockchain. The more you say the words, the more people will be into what's happening. So we have a question from the VR world, but he is going to mess with the mic right now.
So I got a question from virtual reality right now. There's a
that's
question.
awesome.
It's asking a different question now. 1 second.
By the way, guys, so this is Bits and Tokens. Bits and Tokens also did the VR at the eToro party. They are great. If you need them for pictures, if you need them for
They are awesome.
yeah, recording stuff, and check out their YouTube channel, check out their website. Bits and Tokens is great. They're local here, and we always want to support local South Florida companies.
All right. So the first question was, will there be any use of blockchain services in legislation in public use? If not, how can there be? I think you started to touch on that, where there could be some type of use of blockchain services.
Like pilot programs through the state, or?
I think that's also a valid answer.
So I mean, one of the things that we're piloting in Seminole County officially now is a self-sovereign ID. But that's what I'm piloting in Seminole County. That's not necessarily from the legislature, although we plan on getting the legislature on board. Obviously, if we had potentially the idea of a statewide stable coin is something that we're kind of looking at. That's kind of a band-aid on potentially the whole marijuana issue, right? Being illegal federally, and kind of that whole banking crisis, assuming it stays illegal federally. Our databases are super old. So how many of you are familiar with the whole Amendment 4 issue, which was giving felons the right to vote? So that initiative passed. One of the issues is our databases are so bad, we didn't know who half the felons were. We didn't have any data on if they had served their sentence or how long they'd served their sentence, if they had paid restitution, if they'd not paid restitution. The data was just scattered, so overall, our database system as a state is absolutely terrible. And I've been told multiple times that our database infrastructure is crumbling and failing in a lot of ways. So where they see fit, blockchain could potentially step in to solve some of those problems. Obviously, blockchain isn't useful for every database situation.
Just do it close hyperledger, hyperledger backup or something.
Maybe. That's for them to decide, I guess. But yeah, but so I mean that's kind of what we're dealing with. And luckily, once again, we don't need to build it past that. You can just yell.
Better? No? Okay, I got a simple question. So it's a little bit multi-level.
Yeah.
Number one, how is any law in blockchain actually enforceable when you can't comply, even if we wanted to, as a developer or anything else, protected under freedom of speech? And the second component is, like, so if I were to deploy it, like, already protected by First Amendment, what's the benefit of writing a law to protect that as well at the state level, right? Second question is, what gives the state the right to subvert the federal government, as you mentioned in the marijuana case, is a way of workaround, for them to do it and them not the individual? And like, I guess it's like a general question, is like, how do you comply with and what's the benefit of pushing regulatory structure on people when already blockchain cannot actually be controlled by anybody individually, or even a government?
Yeah, so those are great questions. In a sense, very simple, because they're kind of like the older questions, like a federalism, right? The states' rights between the federal government. That's always a fight that's going on. Especially, so the great question is, code is free speech, right? So how do you legislate? Is any legislation in a sense useful, right? So even if I'm promoting what I think is friendly legislation, I know developers are going to innovate anyway. I know if there's any legislation that's harmful to the industry, people are smart and going to find a way around it, right? So my way of thinking about it is, one, I have a mission of making Florida the best place to be, right, for people in this space.
Mutually assured destruction type thing, where like everybody is going to be lobbying on this side versus this side,
Sure.
to kind of level it out.
So the way I think about it is, I mean, you can make your life harder or easier. I don't believe you can stop innovation, but I think you can put a thorn in its side. I think we could ban any kind of crypto blockchain company, but I know they're just going to move offshore. So why wouldn't I want that here at least? And I know other countries are going to try that. So if another country does try, I can say, hey, we didn't, right? So I mean, yeah, broader perspective, and like a fintech regulatory sandbox. You put up a bond and we say all regulations are waived in a certain industry. Go and experiment, right? Because how much do you have to pay to make sure you're covering your ass and you don't have to go to jail or the SEC doesn't fine you, right? So code is free speech, but the fact is the feds might come after you anyway, right? I mean, we have a lot of laws that we think we're entitled to, but the federal government says, oh, that's funny, right? And same on a state level too.
Well, marijuana is why I brought that up.
So marijuana is interesting because I'm trying to make sure I don't go on a tangent. But
This is being live streamed, Sam.
I know, that's careful. I have to be careful. This is going to be, yeah. I know it's going to be used against me in like 3 years.
I think it satisfies me. You're saying that there's other interested parties that are lobbying on the other side, and it's in our best interest to create a framework at a state level to protect individuals that are looking to, I guess, pursue blockchain interests to help them establish some kind of framework to operate within. Right?
Yeah, sure. I mean, and I just want to make sure, like, the marijuana issue is just so funny because it is still illegal federally, but like the past administration, the Obama administration told the DOJ, we know it's illegal, but we're not going to pursue you anymore. And that's kind of when Colorado said, hell yeah, right? Let's go ahead and do it. And there's a certain state of mind, certain idea of safety, knowing a state's got your backing.
Okay.
And that's kind of what Caitlin Long's aiming for. And like I said, because the feds have no idea what they're doing in this regard, they're actually saying, okay, well, we don't really know, so maybe we should look at what Wyoming's doing. But of course, they want power as well, and that's why they're doing what they're doing with the digital assets issue, right? So like I said, nothing new. New issue, same standard.
State versus federal.
Yep,
All right,
exactly.
got it, thanks.
So, last question, and then we are going to ask you guys some questions. Whenever you're ready. Go ahead.
So, I'm not a Florida resident. I actually come from the West Coast.
You should be.
Welcome. Yeah. So,
Better taxes.
in the West Coast, there's an active venture capital community that funds and puts money on the line for a lot of these companies, ideas, things like blockchain, marijuana, whatever. Where is Florida's venture capital community? Why have they not put their money on the line the same way?
So that is a great question. To put it simply, so I'll talk to that in 2 steps. So we don't have Silicon Valley, we don't have New York City, and strictly from those network effects, that's why that capital is still there, right? And that's why Florida will even lose companies to go to those areas. get venture capital and funding. I think those network effects are decreasing because California and New York as a state have completely strangled their communities as best as they can with bad regulation and bad taxes. And that's why you're seeing places like Austin, Texas, Colorado, they're fleeing to places like Arizona, somewhat here in Florida, even North Carolina, and they're generating startup scenes. But then yes, all of them have the same problem that we have here in Florida is, okay, we're here to escape all those terrible taxes and regulations, but where's the money? So Florida's specific problem is all the investors are in real estate. A lot of them are older, a lot of them are more traditional, a lot of them don't understand that it might take a little bit longer to get a return. You actually have to invest in a tech company. It's just a different state of mind, framework. There's people trying to solve that problem. I know Florida Funders, which was set up in Tampa. There's another venture capital agency that was set up in Orlando. I'm sure there's some here in Miami. People are even creating pipelines. I know there's a pipeline a friend of mine's creating from Chicago venture capital to here in Florida. I think it's just going to take time because also people outside of Florida think old people and tourists. They don't realize all the innovation. I think they will. That's another thing is we pass more awesome legislation that's also marketing for the state, so I think they will realize because there's a bunch of stuff, but it just takes time. Yeah, so it's those two things.
It definitely takes time, and we are in, I wouldn't say the beginning, but we're definitely been pushing forward and moving those people to Florida. Carl Icahn just announced last week that he's setting up his fund here, or his VC firm here. And then we have SoftBank, who just set up, I think, their $5 billion vision fund for Latin America here as well. This morning, a lot of people in this room were at the One Community, or One Goal, One Community meeting, and we had Marcelo, who is the COO of SoftBank, speaking there. So you're definitely seeing a shift. I mean, even there's just the brain drain of people in this room alone that have moved from San Francisco, from New York to Florida, specifically Miami. It's growing daily.
And this is one of my favorite stories to pick on the Northeast, which I like to do as well. But there was a billionaire who relocated from New Jersey to Florida. And the state of New Jersey made so much money off of his taxes that they had to call a special session and rebalance their budget. And he moved here, right? So I just think stuff like that is awesome. So, you know, even our traditional just low tax, low regulation state is hopefully going to attract more of that money here. But it's just going to take time.
Yeah, it's shifting though, for sure. So, okay, now this is the part where we had you guys want to come here with some questions. So the first question is, are there any laws that you personally would suggest to Florida's blockchain task force? Dun, 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 dun. All right, Scott.
Is there any way I can pay for my coffee without having to keep track of capital gains tax with cryptocurrency? Is that something that can be changed on the state level?
So I think that's a good question because I think that's in some Wyoming bills, but I think also that the IRS announced something that they weren't going to tax. I have to do some more research on that, but
Yeah, you mean transaction, like if you're paying for it.
Nice. Okay. Cool.
Yeah,
So there you go. Did you hear that, Scott?
No.
You don't have to keep, last week, it was like, it was in CNN as well as the news. Last week they announced you don't have to keep account of the gains and losses, you only count it at the time of cash out. So it doesn't matter
But
the ups
if
and
I'm buying
downs.
a coffee, that's cash out.
Yes,
Right.
so if there was capital gains, if you bought it for $1, the coffee at Starbucks is $5, the $4 is what the capital gains would be. So federally, it's like, depending on your income bracket, it's 25%, you know, so, you know, you owe $1 tax.
You're saying like a payment exemption,
So
right?
that coffee costs you $6.
And that's kind of touchy in the sense that they may have to recognize something like Bitcoin as a currency in order to get out of that regulation. But what I've been studying, and when you get into like I'm working for a government office, we could sponsor a stable coin that's government issued. We have the authority to do that. There are other currencies that are out there, like Berkshire's in New York, right? And they don't have to abide by the same rules that something like Bitcoin would when we're talking about capital gains. So there's a lot of double standards that to me that don't really make sense. It's kind of hard to process them all. But yeah. So to be frank, I don't know if we have the state authority to do something like that, because I think that'll be strictly under the jurisdiction of the IRS, or maybe even since it's Cavalgate, something like the SEC or CFTC, depending.
Any other things you guys think are good ideas or things you've heard of before that maybe you in the position of your company would like to protect yourself from with the blockchain? Go ahead, Maria.
Has there been any traction on the financial regulatory side for entities similar to the ones that are in Wyoming, like the credit institutions, credit unions that they have opened specifically to address those that have challenges with banks?
Oh, you're talking about the bank that Wyoming set up? So the Wyoming bank that got set up wasn't strictly for crypto. It was also backed by the NRA. I don't know if you know about Operation Choke Point, but it was Choke Point. Yeah, I believe so. Operation Choke Point was used to target gun manufacturers and gun sellers. And so the NRA said we need to set up our own bank. As far as on the finance side, so the NRA actually backed that bank as well, and another industry that I can't remember off the top of my head. So doing something similar to that here, I think would be incredibly hard, especially since we have such a large financial scene here, specifically in Miami and Tampa. Because the first thing that the bank associations and even credit unions will say is, well, you don't need a state bank, you can just sign up with us, right? Even though we know that's not true, because I don't know how many people in here have struggled finding a bank account of their business, which I always talk about. And funny enough, we don't need legislation to fix that problem. We just need to talk to the CFO's office or the OFR and say, hey, can you release a statement saying it's okay to bank crypto and blockchain, right? Because it's not like we're marijuana. There's nothing saying we're illegal, but banks choose not to bank us. I know a guy who was a lawyer, and because he was a lawyer working with blockchain companies, they shut down his law firm's bank account.
Wow.
Right? Which makes zero sense. What the hell? Why can't you have somewhere to keep your money? I also know other companies.
Couldn't you sue for discrimination?
You could, but who's going to win? One lawyer or an entire bank? I mean, so there are people who have talked about maybe getting some giant lawsuit together, but who wants to be that original person? Right? A lot of it's logistic, a lot of it's you have the time because you're a startup, you just want to survive. You also have time to sue the United States' largest financial institutions. Yeah. Well,
Here's for the Proud Boys. Which one? Proud Boys. Let's not worry about it. I'll talk about it.
but yeah, so in short, Wyoming's in a unique situation. I don't know how many states are going to be able to replicate that. The broader question is, why the hell can't we get banking when we know we're not in a legal industry?
Can I make a motion to propose a bill that bans banks from banning those that use the word crypto or blockchain in their accounts?
Yeah, so we can definitely do that. It will never be heard.
Cool. Thanks for
We
the
can definitely, because it just won't. Because they'll lobby against it. So let's go back to where did I have that? Okay, so the fact that this happened means the bills were brought up to those individual committees and it hurt. So what happened is if I promoted a bill that, say, large players like banks didn't like, they would lobby the individuals on that committee or the chair of that committee and say, do not hear that bill. This is how much money we maybe donate to your campaign. You hear that bill, you will not get that money. So they say, sounds good to me, right? So that's one. Or they would give us maybe 4 committees, knowing that we would not be able to make it through each committee by the time session ends, so our bill would just die naturally, right?
So is the solution to then find a bank that's willing to work with you when there's no popularity around that and grow from there?
Yes, that's absolutely a solution. I've tried that with some banks, and I've tried to promote banks that are friendly to the industry, but even the ones that are friendly are, they might be sketched out. Some of the people I know have gotten banks that are friendly, but they're shitty bank accounts. They don't have good terms because they know they have leverage.
Are you looking at really credit unions in this case?
I think most people do banks. I've talked to some companies because, like I said, I can buy cryptocurrency using my credit union account, but I can't buy it with my bank account. So I think credit unions tend to be more accepting, but for some reason, I know there's a reason, because I've been told before, but I can't remember it right now. A lot of companies would prefer to have a bank over a credit union. So, yes, yes.
Alright, and also too, some of the banks that are bigger in doing business with you, if you do blockchain and crypto stuff, their minimum buy-in is like $1 billion. So it's like, there's a high barrier to entry. And then also too, just to let you guys know, since we're on the topic of banks, probably, okay. Do you guys know who has the most patents on blockchain technology? Expanos. It's Bank of America, it's Fidelity, it's Goldman Sachs, right? So these are the companies that are using what they call DLT, distributed ledger technology, the most. However, when it comes to Bitcoin, which is probably one of the longest proven use case of blockchain technology, they're threatened by it. So not to say that they're against blockchain, I don't want to confuse that, they're more against the cryptocurrency and Bitcoin side of things.
And I've met and talked with a lot of banks. I've talked to the Florida Bankers Association. I try to understand their side of things, because a lot of them at least claim it's ignorance and they just need to be educated. So we've done that. We've done some programs where we've sat in front of banks or different bankers and educated them and hosted roundtables. It doesn't necessarily change the pattern, but we can at least say that they know and that we get it. So that's why you have a state that made its own bank for this specific reason. That's how big of a problem it is. You can yell.
Operation Choke Point was payday lenders.
Payday lenders, okay.
And then also on for like coalition building for supported blockchain, I know some of the biggest use cases happen in like provenance and food supply tracking. So like there's a huge agriculture industry here in Florida. You had that slide up that one of the main cabinet members is the agriculture head. So like maybe get them together on, hey, this is a really useful technology for making sure our food supply is safe or something like that.
Absolutely. So already working on stuff like that. Luckily, if it comes from the task force, we can say, oh, a whole committee approved of it, instead of just some guy who's been vouching and talking to you about it forever, right? So already on that, but very smart, yes.
I have a question about like, are you working on the protection of the digital assets? Like, I guess like implementing.
Just give it a second. Don't turn it off, please.
Just reset.
It works now. Go ahead.
So my question is about the protection of the digital assets. Mr. Gilbert, like, will you guys be working on protecting, like, let's say if a smart contract is implemented to basically take control of like a digital transaction or something, and I mean, as a digital asset, what laws would currently be in place to maybe like fight off, getting your digital assets frozen or something like that?
I have no idea. That's not something I necessarily think about. That's a good question. And that's kind of the
Hold your
hard.
private keys. That's what
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is if we would need to legislate anything in that area at all besides, maybe qualifying what a digital asset actually is, right? So sometimes we don't want to legislate the minutia of something like that. And sometimes we don't have to because current laws do that anyway. Like stealing. We don't have to legislate anything new if you're going to steal a digital asset, right? Now it might be a problem if someone from China steals your digital asset, right? Sorry, you can't get that back. But yeah, so in specific regards to legislation with that specific issue, I really don't know.
Okay. What are the implications of cryptocurrencies and like blockchain with travel? And then are there any steps to move towards maybe encouraging additional, like an increase in travel using this currency?
What do you mean,
and
from a legislative standpoint, or Florida, so like remittances, or like when you're going through the airport, cash exchanges, or?
I'm talking like the potential growth in the hospitality industry because of Florida being an incredible focus for tourism and hospitality, and the opportunity that there could be just with opening up commerce throughout the world with a lot of countries and areas where maybe their currency wouldn't allow them to travel here, but suddenly you have an opportunity for a huge influx of travel.
Yeah, so in my mind, the question is really how do we make it so that people in Orlando or people who travel to Miami, maybe instead of having to turn their euros into dollars, can just go ahead and use Bitcoin.
Well, not only that, but to help encourage travel. Like, is there any legislation being worked on about that at all to like encourage hospitality and travel to Florida?
No, and technically you don't need any, right? That's just acceptance, and that's the other thing. Like,
Any company can take it. My company
Yeah.
takes Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin. Any company can take it. It's just up to them.
yeah, you want to be careful how you legislate. So, like, I wouldn't recommend legislation that says you have to take it, right? It's their choice whether they take it. But by being friendly and having a task force, we can kind of promote those things and say, it's okay, by the way, if you're in the hospitality industry, we can just make an announcement and say, if you accept Bitcoin, that's fine. We'll just treat it as another currency. But there's nothing the state, in my opinion, can do or should do to legally promote that, or in a legislative way promote that.
Okay, that's really good.
Because it's a dangerous door to open, right? To say, oh, I want the state to come and help solve this problem. Industry should be willing to do it itself and
There
step
has to
up.
be like a hedge net. A lot of big companies don't want to take it because they're afraid of the risk of it going down the next day. So without that hedge in between, like buffer for
Yeah.
the differential, I don't think big companies are going to take it unless they have some kind of hedge.
And like sometimes targeting that issue may be taxes, and maybe they're worried, oh, am I gonna, like, if I hold this Bitcoin and it goes up in value, well now, shoot, I'm gonna have to pay capital gains on that. Right? I mean, maybe they could have, the cheat's always BitPay, right? Just use Bitcoin as a vehicle and you receive cash. And that's the easiest thing any company could do, and if they wanted to do it, they could already be doing it. And there's zero legal risk in doing that. But and maybe there is a need, but I'm sure if Walt Disney thought there was a need, maybe they would have already done it. Not sure.
So any more questions that you guys would say, hey, if the Florida Blockchain Task Force was here right now and we wanted to say that we want you to implement this, any other comments? Because I'm taking notes. Okay,
I know the state of Vermont has some type of incentive to encourage developers or nomadic workers to relocate to their state with some kind of stipend. Is that something that Florida's ever considered or could consider?
So
So-
we have something called Enterprise Florida.
Wait, question repeat is just Vermont has a stipend for people to be able to relocate to Vermont. Is that something that we would want implemented here? And the reason why it's important for everyone to hear these questions because these are really great ideas and we want to make sure that as a community we get behind them.
Miami's already one of the fastest growing cities in the top 5 in the country right now.
So, I mean, stipend, tax break, whatever you want to call it, tax incentive. So we have a whole government entity called Enterprise Florida. What Enterprise Florida does is it goes in and finds companies specifically, not necessarily individual developers, but companies specifically, and goes and says, you should move to Florida, this is how much money you're going to save, and we'll give you tax breaks to do it. I'm sure we could set up a program like that. Generally, Florida doesn't like giving out tax breaks or tax incentives because we're already so low tax. And luckily, because of that low tax environment, people are moving here anyway. So the next question might be, why do we need to further incentivize people when they're already moving here? But that is a good idea. And Vermont, of course, I believe is a higher tax state. So that's kind of the irony and all that as well. Yeah, potentially.
And I think something you didn't say that you probably already know, and the reason why a lot of colleges are here is because when you're an early stage company, you need cheap, highly educated workers, which is why they're concentrated in Los Angeles, New York, and San Francisco. We have great incredible universities, and one of my mentors in New York who works at NYU, was a professor at NYU, and he says, until Florida gets better schools, I'm sorry, the big ones are not going to be
Yeah.
working there.
I mean, I would argue that's a feedback loop. So your argument, so do you want to say that over the mic so everyone can hear it?
So one of my mentors is the director of he's a global blockchain strategist for Microsoft and a professor at NYU, and he told me that one of the reasons why we don't have a tremendous amount of funds, like they have, I mean, thousands in the Bay Area and hundreds certainly in LA. The reason why they're not flocking here is because they know that early stage companies that are based here need highly educated and also very cheap labor. And he said until Florida gets better schools, you know, no offense to anyone that graduated from a Florida state school or even a private school, he says until they get better schools or up the ante and increase the acceptance, you know, criteria or something, then they're not going to be attracting the major funds. You're not going to see Andreessen Horowitz set up a branch here, okay? It's not.
So my counter to that would be one, network effects, kind of like I talked about earlier. So Florida made the decision to really start heavily investing in its university infrastructure in like the 1960s because we realized all we have is old people. And I think if you look at our universities today, they are incredibly good. I think they're still getting there. And that's interesting. Yeah. Which I could go into some details about that, but if you brought, say, an issue like that up in Tallahassee, you'd see very quickly who likes your idea and who hates your idea. Because there's certain industries, maybe certain unions, that hate the idea of raising the bar on an educational level. Because they say you're prohibiting people, because maybe you're flunking people who don't deserve to flunk. That could be an argument. Not that that argument makes much sense, but I've heard that before. So that, you know, that's
one of the poorest areas in the whole country that are going Harvard to hit in on academic
That's a good question.
We're gonna let you guys sidebar just because it's getting close to 9. We don't want to hold everyone too long. But Samuel, did you have any ending comments for everyone?
No.
We're gonna let you eat the rest of the pizza.
Yeah. So if any of you want to get involved, obviously, and you know, reach out to me. I know I have contacted. Oh well, it's gone now. I have my contact information on the screen, but please, you can come and get it. Also, you don't necessarily need me to get involved. I just try to focus all our energy in Tallahassee. But like I said, just stay informed. Know who your actual local, state, and representatives and senators are. They owe you a meeting. You can meet with them whenever you want. You can email them and say, hey, you know, I want a meeting. Even if it's just to talk to them, because you're the ones who elect them. Even if you didn't vote for them, they still represent you, so you can go and talk to them. And then, yeah, please use me if you have any concerns. I love hearing real-world stories about, you know, either why you came to Florida or what legislation or regulations are hurting you, because I can then point to you when I'm in Tallahassee and say, this is someone who you're actually affecting by creating bad policy or helping by creating good policy. So thank you for letting me rant in the civics class. Let me see you guys soon in the future.
Thank you, Sam. That was amazing. I'm glad everyone here participated and hope you got to ask the question that you had in mind. I just wanted to let you know that after this, we usually go to Lost Boy right across the street. It's a bar. We get a drink. We have discounted prices on drinks. That's, I think it's like 50% off. I also wanted to let you know that tomorrow we are going to be having a pitch night here. The Founders Institute is going to be hosting the pitch night here, and it's open to any entrepreneur that wants to present an idea and get some feedback from some seasoned entrepreneurs. Immediately after that, we're also going to be giving a trading course focused on financial analysis for any of you that want to learn how to trade. And also,
who here is interested in blockchain supply chain? There we go. I know all you guys are. So tomorrow we are having a blockchain supply chain event. Now this is not a free event. It's not held here. Something that's happening right now, just to give some more updates on what's happening in Florida, is there is a public-private partnership happening between the Port of Miami, the Miami Airport, and the Beacon Council to make our port smart cities. So we all know Florida is a major port into the United States from the Caribbean and Latin America. And so it's like, we have this amazing technology, let's streamline our stuff. So tomorrow at the Port of Miami, we are having an event, If you're interested in attending, please see me and I will give you some details about that. I have a discount code too if you're interested. And then tomorrow we also have 2 events here at the center. One starting at 6, which is Maria talked about. It is a pitch event for startups by the Founders Institute. Founders Institute is also another example of a Silicon Valley and global-based company that is now moving part of their organization here. And then directly afterwards, we do have a trading fundamentals class. So I hope you guys can come out if you want to learn more about that. And we're going to stay here for a little bit, and then we are all going to walk over to Lost Boy for 50% off drinks because we love Flagler Street and Miami.
Last but not least, just a quick reminder for those of you that came out to the party, if you want to take advantage of an offer, eToro is giving you $50 if you make an initial deposit of $50. So take advantage, guys, and learn how to trade tomorrow. Bye. Just make a deposit on the eToro account that you sign up with in order to attend the party.
But make sure you sign up for eToro with our link.
I believe they all did when they RSVP'd. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, you guys. See you next Monday, or next Monday.
What they're saying is that you put in 50 and they give you 50 credit. So when you trade